Joining us now, Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby. Admiral, welcome. Thank you for being here.
You bet. Thank you.
So there was clearly, as we all witnessed, a tone change on Friday when Jake Sullivan briefed from the White House on the escalating situation on the Ukraine-Russia border. What specifically has the Pentagon seen in recent days that would suggest Putin could invade Ukraine any day now?
I think Jake talked about this. I mean, it really was a combination of factors. One, what we're seeing in plain sight, the continued accumulation of Russian military capabilities along that border with Ukraine and in Belarus. He continues to add force capability, well over 100,000 right now, and actually over the last few days even more. And number two, I think a mosaic of the intelligence that we're seeing. Not speaking to it specifically, but you know, we have good sources of intelligence, and they're telling us that. That things are sort of building now to some sort of crescendo opportunity for Mr. Putin.
Are we specifically sharing that intelligence with our Ukrainian counterparts? I mean, it is remarkable to hear Trey Yanks there talk about the cafes filled, the bars and restaurants are packed, and the Ukrainian people are going about their daily lives as normal.
Yeah, what I can tell you is we absolutely are sharing our information and our perspectives with Ukrainian leadership, as well as our NATO allies and our partners in the region. I mean, we've been very transparent about what we're seeing, what our perspectives are, and quite frankly, listening to them about what they're seeing as well.
But specifically on the intelligence, multiple new outlets, including German newspaper Der Spiegel, Admiral, are reporting the U.S. Secret Service, the CIA, and the Pentagon have received intel of an exceptionally detailed invasion plan scheduled for this Wednesday, just a few days away. Can you confirm or deny those reports?
No, I'm not in a position to confirm those reports, Sandra. I think you can understand we want to be careful about publicly talking about intelligence and sources and methods and that kind of thing. What I can tell you, and I point back to what Jake said on Friday, he's absolutely right. We believe that a major military action could happen any day now. And again, these assessments are coming from a variety of sources, and not exclusively just inside intelligence, but also what we're seeing in plain sight. These more than 100,000 troops now continue to be arrayed against Ukraine's border.
But the Ukrainian president is insisting that they be privy to the intelligence that is leading the United States to believe this situation is escalating as quickly as it is.
Sure.
So you said you're sharing information. Are you sharing with them the specific intelligence that is leading to this? Because many Ukrainians are saying that we are sowing confusion and chaos here as a country.
Yeah, we've been very transparent with the Ukrainian leadership about our perspectives and what we're seeing. I think I'd leave it at that.
Okay. One senior national security official who briefed reporters shortly after the president's phone call yesterday with Vladimir Putin, Admiral, said that there was no fundamental change in the dynamic that has unfolded now for several weeks. So is that a sign after that phone call yesterday that time is running out for diplomacy?
It's certainly not a sign that things are moving in the right direction. It's certainly not a sign that Mr. Putin has any intention to de-escalate the tensions, and it's certainly not a sign that that he's recommitting himself to a diplomatic path forward. So it doesn't give us any cause for optimism.
That said, Germany's Vice Chancellor Habeck said today, Admiral, that we may be on the verge of war in Europe. Their words. Germany's chancellor is going to be traveling to Moscow Tuesday, as you well know, to meet with Vladimir Putin. So is this a last-ditch effort to avoid all-out war in Europe?
I don't know if I'd say last ditch, but certainly we recognize that the time component here seems to be shrinking, and that gives us all cause for concern. But again, we've said it, and we still believe it today, that there is still a time and a space for a diplomatic path forward. We still believe that there's a way to de-escalate the tensions here, find a peaceful way out of this so that a war in Ukraine can be averted. We still believe there's an opportunity for that, and we welcome these moves by our European allies to try to engage Mr. Putin diplomatically.
President Biden had a pretty stark warning to Americans currently in Ukraine, saying that they should leave now and that U.S. troops will not be deployed inside Ukraine to help evacuate them if they stay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, this is the time, if you're an American citizen and you're in Ukraine, you really should be making your way out. Again, we believe that a major military action could be only days away. Could happen any day now, quite frankly. So now's not the time to be in Ukraine. You should make plans to leave immediately. And as the president has said, U.S. troops will not be fighting in Ukraine. Now, we have added some force posture to what is already a very robust force posture in Europe of 80,000 troops. We've added some to that to reassure allies and to deter aggression against the NATO alliance, but there is no plan, no expectation that those troops are going to be going into Ukraine.
This is what the president had to say about this week in a new interview. Listen.
What are your plans toward American citizens who are in Ukraine and might be there during an invasion? What scenarios would you put American troops to rescue and get Americans out?
There's not. That's a world war. When Americans and Russians start shooting at one another, we're in a very different world than we've ever been in.
Not even on behalf of simply evacuating Americans.
No. How do you do that? How do you even find them? This is not like, I'm hoping that if in fact he's foolish enough to go in, he's smart enough not to in fact do anything that would negatively impact on American citizens.
So, Admiral, outside of a military evacuation, what assistance can Americans expect if they struggle to leave Ukraine?
The State Department has set up information portals on their website and at the embassy there, which is still in Kyiv, to assist Americans with whatever they need, even if it's financial assistance. I mean, so the State Department is very much focused on this, willing to assist Americans. And Sandra, I would say, you know, again, this isn't a new mantra for us. Yes, we are urging them to leave right now, but the State Department has been nothing but transparent over the last several weeks about the plans to leave Ukraine and the need not to go there. So, I mean, there's plenty of time to do this, and there's plenty of infrastructure in Ukraine right now to do that. The airports are still running, the railroads are still running, the highways are still open. So there's plenty of opportunities for Americans to leave, and they really should take these warnings and these advisories very seriously.
Plenty of time also to still impose new sanctions on Russia, which you have been against, the White House has been against. It's only being used to deter Russia as a consequence if they indeed invade. Considering diplomacy seems to not be working at this point, would you be supportive of imposing sanctions preemptively, Admiral?
We've talked about this, Sandra. I mean, if it's a deterrent and you use it before the aggression is made or the transgression is made, then you lose your deterrent effect. You know, if you punish somebody for something that they haven't done yet, then they might as well just go ahead and do it. So we believe there's a deterrent effect by keeping them in reserve. And we have been very clear with the international community and with Mr. Putin about the severity of the economic consequences that he could face.
Okay, so imposing sanctions before Putin were to invade are off the table. Is that clear?
Right now, we are not considering a preemptive sanction regime.
All right, Admiral, finally, I want to ask you about this Washington Post reporting, and they were, through a FOIA request, able to dig up a 2,000-page report, and they were reporting on these declassified documents on Afghanistan, speaking of transparency, that do back U.S. commanders who said that President Biden's team was indecisive during that crisis, during the evacuation. Yeah. What is your response to that, as the description of that analysis is a calamitous exit from Afghanistan, and it shows in full detail?
Yeah, I think we need to keep these documents in perspective. They're basically interview documents that were meant to assist our investigation into the Abbey Gate bombing, which we, of course, unveiled and revealed a couple of weeks ago. So that's what the source of these documents are. These people talking to investigators. They didn't think that these documents were going to become public. They weren't talking to reporters. They were talking to investigators who were trying to get at a very deadly attack. And they were talking about appropriately what they saw there at the airport, what they experienced there in Kabul and in Afghanistan in real time. So they're valuable documents that will be used for a much larger after-action review that the Pentagon is conducting right now, and which will take in not just what was happening at the airport, but what was happening over the course of since the Doha Agreement was signed in February 2020 and at a larger strategic level. I would also add that, here in Washington, we had been planning for evacuation as far back as April, and there was no effort by Washington, certainly not the National Security Council specifically to slow down that planning, to slow down those pre-positioning of forces that we did in the summer, to slow down the actual execution of the evacuation. So again, these were documents that assert impressions and perspectives, which are very important, down at the tactical level in real time. We need to conduct a larger, more strategic level after action review to get at the whole sense of this, and we're doing that.
Good to get your reaction to that. Admiral Kirby from the Pentagon, appreciate your time this morning, sir. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.